The sound Emma made when her wrist broke was the sound that finally broke something in Kate, too. It wasn't a scream. Emma was 8 years old, and she had already learned, the way children learn the things they should never have to learn, that screaming made it worse. It was a small sound, a sharp intake of breath, high and involuntary, the kind of sound a person makes when the pain arrives before the mind can prepare for it. And then silence, because Emma was 8 and she already knew silence was safer. Kate was 16. She was standing in the kitchen doorway. She had her school bag on her shoulder because she had been about to leave, and she had heard it, and she had stopped, and she was looking at her little sister sitting on the kitchen floor with her right wrist held against her chest at an angle that Kate knew from experience was wrong. Their father was already picking up his keys from the counter. "She fell," Roy Harper said. He said it to the kitchen, to no one in particular, in the tone he used for things he had decided were settled. He had dark circles under his eyes because he had been drinking since Thursday, and today was Saturday, and the anger that lived in him like a permanent resident had been very close to the surface all week. Leah, the oldest at 19, had said something at dinner on Wednesday that he had decided was disrespectful, and he had not forgotten it. And the 3 girls had spent 4 days walking carefully around the edges of his mood, the way you walk around something that might explode. "Clumsy, get her some ice." He walked past Kate without looking at her. Kate did not move. She listened to his footsteps in the hallway, the front door, his truck starting in the driveway. She listened to the truck back out and the sound of it going down the street toward the road, toward City Hall, where he would sit in his office for 8 hours being the respectable man the town believed him to be. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her school bag on her shoulder and looked at her little sister on the floor. Emma was not crying. Her face was the specific color of a child in serious pain who has decided that crying is not an option. Grayish white. Lips pressed together, eyes very bright. She was rocking slightly, holding her wrist, and the angle of it made Kate's stomach turn because she had seen that angle before, on herself, 4 years ago, and she knew what it meant. Leah appeared from the hallway. She saw Emma. Her face did the thing their faces all did when this happened, the rapid collapse of expression, the look of people who have been through this enough times that the shock has worn away, but the pain has not and never will. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and crouched in front of Emma. "Let me see, baby," Leah said. "It hurts," Emma said, the first words she had spoken since the sound. "I know it does," Leah said. "I need to see it." Emma let her look. Leah touched it gently, and even that small touch made Emma go rigid and press her lips together harder. Leah, for a moment, and thought about the last 2 years. She thought about the time before their mother died, when the anger still lived in Roy, but their mother had been the wall between it and them. The way she had always found a way to redirect or absorb or manage the thing that lived in their father. She thought about the morning of their mother's funeral, when she had understood for the first time that the wall was gone and there was nothing between them and Roy anymore. She thought about the 2 times the police had come. The first time was 14 months ago. Their neighbor, Mrs. Aldrich, had called after hearing Leah screaming. Deputy Calloway had arrived and had stood in the living room talking to Roy in the particular relaxed way of men who know each other well, and had left after 20 minutes, saying that family matters were best handled within the family. Roy had been on the city council for 11 years. Sheriff Donahue had been his hunting partner for longer than Kate had been alive. The second time was 6 months ago. Kate herself had called from the bathroom, her phone pressed against her thigh, whispering the address. This time, Sheriff Donahue himself had come. He had stood in the kitchen and looked at Roy and looked at Kate's face and said there didn't appear to be evidence of any crime. He had looked at Kate when he said it, with an expression that was not quite a warning, but was not anything else either. She had understood then that the phone in her hand was not a weapon, not pointed in that direction. She looked at Emma on the floor. 8 years old, wrist broken, rocking in silence because she had already learned at 8 years old that silence was safer than sound. Kate felt something settle in her chest. Not rage, though the rage was there. Something colder and more purposeful than rage. The feeling of a decision being made somewhere below conscious thought. The feeling of a door closing permanently on everything that had come before. She picked up her phone. She did not call 911. She scrolled to a name she had not called in 6 weeks. Sarah Cross. Her best friend since 4th grade. But it was not Sarah she was calling. It was Sarah's mother, who had looked at Kate with a specific kind of attention at the school spring concert 3 years ago, and had said afterward, quietly, while the other parents collected their children, "Kate, if you ever need anything, I mean anything, you call me directly. Not Sarah, me. You understand?" Kate had understood. She had filed it away the way she filed things she might need someday. She had hoped she would never need it. She called Linda Cross. It rang twice. "Kate!" Linda's voice was immediate and fully awake, even though it was 7:15 in the morning, as if she had been waiting. "Tell me what happened." Kate told her. She told her about the sound Emma had made. She told her about the wrist. She told her about the 2 times the police had come and left. She told her everything in a flat, controlled voice, standing in the kitchen doorway while Leah sat on the floor with Emma and held her carefully and talked to her in the low, steady voice she used when she was trying to hold all 3 of them together. Linda was silent for a moment when Kate finished. "Is Emma conscious?" Linda said. "Is she breathing normally?" "Yes," Kate said. "But her wrist is broken. I can see it." "I know," Linda said. "I'm going to take care of that right now. Kate, listen carefully. Don't call anyone else. Don't post anything. Don't move Emma until I call you back. Can you do that?" "Yes," Kate said. 10 minutes, Linda said. She called back in 7. Subscribe right now, because what Linda Cross had been doing for 3 years is something Roy Harper never once thought to worry about. Linda Cross was 44 years old. She ran the regional office of a child protection advocacy organization called Safe Ground, which operated across 11 counties and had formal partnerships with 3 federal agencies. She had started working there 8 years ago, 2 years after her son Marcus died at age 6 from injuries inflicted by a man who had been reported to local child services 4 times and 4 times been allowed to remain in the home. She did not talk about Marcus often. She did not need to. The work spoke for itself. Marcus had liked red. Every jacket, every shirt, every crayon he reached for first. The day he died, he was wearing a red sweater she had bought him for his birthday 2 weeks earlier. She had kept it for a year in a drawer she did not open. And then one morning, she had opened it, held it for a long time, folded it back carefully, and gone to work. She had not missed a day since. She had decided, in the year after he died, that grief was either a wall or a door. She had chosen door. She had walked through it every morning for 8 years. 3 years ago, a social worker named Patricia had flagged the Harper family in the county system. 2 daughters in the school nurse's office in the same semester, each with injuries consistent with impact trauma, each with explanations that were technically plausible and internally inconsistent. Patricia had opened a file. Roy Harper had called the county supervisor, a man who played golf with the mayor, and Patricia had been reassigned within 2 weeks. But before she was reassigned, Patricia had sent the file to Linda Cross. Linda had been building on that file for 3 years. She had done it the right way, which was the slow way, the way that produced evidence that could not be thrown out and testimony that could not be recanted, and documentation that could not be explained away by a man who played golf with the right people. She had 6 statements from school staff. She had 4 years of emergency room records obtained through proper legal channels, records that showed a pattern that no single incident could establish on its own. She had a written statement from the pediatrician who had treated Emma twice and who had written in her private notes, which she had never shared with anyone, exactly what she believed had happened and why. Linda had those notes. She had been waiting for one thing. She had known from 20 years of this work that the moment always came. The moment when someone inside the house found the courage to make the call. She could not manufacture that moment. She could not rush it. She could only be ready for it. Kate Harper had been on Linda's radar since the spring concert 3 years ago. She had watched the girl standing slightly apart from the other families with the watchfulness of a child who has learned that paying attention is a survival skill. She had introduced herself afterward and said what she always said to the children she recognized. She had been ready ever since. The call she made in the 7 minutes before she called Kate back was to a federal prosecutor named James Whitfield, whose office had a standing interest in cases involving law enforcement complicity in domestic violence. Specifically, the kind of situation where a local sheriff's documented pattern of non-response to a specific address could be proven across multiple incidents spanning years. James Whitfield picked up on the first ring. He said, "How solid is it?" She said, "The most solid I have built in 3 years. ER records, school documentation, 6 staff witnesses, a pediatrician's private notes, and a fresh incident this morning with a minor who needs immediate medical care. The older girl made the call herself. She is 16, and she is steady, and she will give a statement that will hold." He said, "I can have a team at City Hall by noon." She said, "I need the hospital authorized first. The 8-year-old needs a doctor before anything else." He said, "Mercy General, ask for Carol Reyes. She is their child advocacy nurse. Nobody speaks to the girls without her present. I will call ahead right now." Linda called Kate back and told her to take Emma to Mercy General. She told her to ask for Carol Reyes and say Linda Cross sent them. She told her that she was coming herself and bringing people with her, and that by the time Roy Harper finished his day at City Hall and drove home this evening, everything would be different. Kate was quiet for a moment. "You have been watching us," she said. It was not an accusation. It was the statement of a girl who was intelligent and who had just understood the shape of something she had not seen before. "I have been preparing," Linda said. "I was waiting for you to be ready." "I should have called sooner," Kate said, and her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, just enough to let through the weight of it. 2 years of navigating a house built on fear, of watching Leah absorb things and watching Emma grow up learning silence was safer. "You called when you called," Linda said. "That is the only time that matters. Now go get your sister." Carol Reyes was waiting at the Mercy General entrance when the 3 of them arrived. She was a compact woman in her 50s, with gray hair and the manner of someone who has spent decades at the exact intersection of medicine and grief. Warm without sentimentality, efficient without coldness. She looked at Emma's wrist, confirmed the break, and had her in radiology within 20 minutes. She brought Kate and Leah coffee and orange juice and sat with them in the waiting area without asking questions, because she had done this long enough to know that waiting rooms were not for questions. Linda arrived at 11. She came with 2 colleagues from SafeGround and a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as an investigator from the federal prosecutor's office, and who shook Kate's hand the way adults rarely shook teenage girls' hands, directly and seriously. He asked for a preliminary statement with Linda present. Kate gave it. She told him everything in the same flat, controlled voice and watched him write it down, and felt something she had not felt in 14 months, which was the specific feeling of being believed by someone with the authority to act on it. She had not known until this moment how much of her energy had been consumed by not being believed, how much it had cost her every day, how much lighter it was to set it down. Emma's wrist was a clean break. It would heal completely. She was going to be fine. Kate put her face in her hands when the doctor said it. She did not cry. She breathed very carefully until the tightness in her chest released enough to speak. Then she looked up. "What happens now?" she said. Linda told her. At 2 in the afternoon, federal investigators arrived at Hartwell City Hall with a warrant. Roy Harper was taken from his office. He was walked in handcuffs through the main corridor of City Hall, past the front desk where he had worked for 11 years, past the administrative office where 2 clerks stopped typing and stared, past the mayor's open door where the mayor stood and watched without speaking, and through the glass-fronted lobby where the street was visible and anyone passing could see exactly what was happening. Roy Harper was a man who had built his entire life around being seen a certain way. He had organized the town 4th of July barbecue for 7 consecutive years. He had been photographed with the governor at a regional development summit 3 years ago and had the photo framed on his office wall. He had a plaque on his desk that said, "Community Leader," given to him at the annual Chamber of Commerce dinner, which he had attended every year for a decade with his daughter seated in the front row in matching dresses, because appearances were the architecture of the life he had decided to live. He had never once believed it would end this way. He had believed, with the specific certainty of a man who has been protected by the right people for a long time, that his world was permanent. That the version of himself he had constructed in public was real enough to overwrite the version that existed at home. That the girls would grow up and leave, and the thing that lived in him would never have to be seen by anyone who had the power to do something about it. He had coached Little League. He had attended every funeral and every ribbon cutting and every school board meeting. He had shaken every hand that mattered and donated to every cause that people noticed and made sure that his name, in this town, meant something. He had believed that what he had built in public was permanent, that it was protection, that it was the thing that kept the private version of himself safe from consequence. He was walked through City Hall in handcuffs at 2 in the afternoon, and 4 people had their phones out before he reached the door. At 3:15, a second team arrived at the Hartwell County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Thomas Donahue was informed that his non-response to the Harper address, documented across 14 separate incidents over 26 months, had been formally submitted to the State Attorney General as evidence of willful negligence in the mandatory reporting of child abuse. He was placed on administrative leave pending criminal investigation. Donahue sat in his own chair and let them speak. His face had the look of a man running arithmetic on a calculation he had believed was safe, discovering now the size of the error. He had stood in Kate Harper's kitchen 6 months ago and told a 16-year-old girl there was no evidence of a crime. He had made a choice. He was finding out this afternoon that choices of that kind do not disappear. They wait. At 4 o'clock, Linda drove back to the hospital. She found Kate and Leah in Emma's room. Emma was in a hospital bed with a purple cast on her wrist, the color she had chosen from the chart, and she was watching cartoons with the careful, tentative relaxation of a child who does not yet fully trust that it is safe to feel comfortable, but is beginning, cautiously, to try. Leah sat beside her, holding her good hand. When Linda came in, Leah looked up and something moved across her face that Linda had seen many times in many hospital rooms over 20 years. It was the face of a person who has been pressing all of their weight against a door to keep it closed, for so long that they can no longer remember what it felt like not to press, and who has just been told they can stop. She did not collapse. She was a Harper girl. But she exhaled a breath that seemed to have been held for 2 years. Kate was at the window. She looked at the parking lot below, the ordinary afternoon, the light sitting flat and unremarkable on the concrete. "Did they get him?" she said. "Yes," Linda said. "Both of them." Kate said, "Both." "The sheriff, too. The process takes time, but the documentation is solid. The charges will hold." Kate nodded slowly, still looking at the window. "You said you were waiting for us to be ready," she said. "What if we had never called?" Linda considered the honest answer. "I would have found another way," she said. "Eventually. But it would have taken longer and been harder to prove. You calling meant no one can say this was manufactured from outside. It meant the three of you are the center of this, not the system, you. Kate was quiet. My mom used to say the bravest thing wasn't not being afraid, she said finally. It was doing it anyway. Linda felt her throat close. She thought about Marcus in his red jacket. She thought about the door she had chosen. She was right, Linda said. At 6:15, Roy Harper was formally charged with 3 counts of child abuse, 1 count of aggravated assault causing bodily harm to a minor under 10 years of age and making false statements to law enforcement. James Whitfield had told Linda that morning this was the kind of case that became precedent. Roy Harper was not going home for a very long time. A news crew arrived at the courthouse at 6:30. They filmed Roy Harper being processed in the early evening light, and he looked the way men look when the structure of their life collapses all at once. Smaller, diminished, as though everything he had performed for 20 years had been load-bearing, and without it, there was less of him than anyone had realized. Linda watched it on the small television in the waiting room. Leah sat beside her. Kate stood in the doorway. Emma slept behind them with her purple cast on the blanket. No one spoke. Then Emma, not fully asleep, said quietly, "Is he going to come home?" Leah went to her, sat on the bed, took Emma's good hand. "No, baby," she said, her voice perfectly steady because that was what Emma needed. "He is not coming home." "Ever?" "Not to us," Leah said. "Never to us." Emma looked at her with the serious face of a child deciding whether to believe something important. Then something shifted, slowly, the way things shift in early spring, not suddenly, but undeniably. She closed her eyes. She went to sleep. Kate looked at Linda. "Thank you," she said. "You made the call," Linda said. "I answered it." Kate looked at her sisters and then back at Linda, and her voice when it came was not controlled anymore. All the weight of it finally allowed to surface. "I should have called sooner." Linda put her hand on Kate's shoulder. "You called," she said. "That is what happened today. Everything after this comes from that one call." Kate nodded. She breathed. She thought about the 6 months since the second time the sheriff had come and gone. She thought about every morning she had gotten up and gone to school and come home and managed the house and protected Emma and watched Leah and told herself she was handling it, that she had it under control, that she would figure out a different way. She thought about the weight of that, the specific, exhausting weight of a person who is holding everything together with no outside help, who has been told twice by the people whose job it is to help that there is nothing to be done. She had believed them. That was the thing that hurt most when she examined it. She had believed that she was alone in this because the people with the authority to act had looked at it and walked away. She had not known about Linda Cross. She had not known that 3 years ago a social worker named Patricia had sent a file before she was reassigned. She had not known that somewhere outside the walls of her house, someone had been building something patient and thorough and waiting for the moment it could be used. She had not known she was not alone. She was 16 years old. She had made one phone call. The door had come off its hinges. The light was coming in. Her sisters were safe. Outside, the evening was ordinary. Streetlights coming on, people going home. Inside, 3 girls who had survived something they should never have had to survive were together in a room that was safe. And a woman who had promised a dead boy she would keep going was sitting quietly with her hands in her lap. And the only sound was Emma breathing in her sleep. It was enough. It was everything. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and leave a comment, because somewhere out there is a Kate who has not called yet. And somewhere there is a Linda who is ready.